We'll start the bidding at $5,000 for Grandma Rose's diamond engagement ring. Aunt Margaret's voice rang through the country club banquet hall, holding up my grandmother's ring like it was a prize at a carnival instead of a cherished family heirloom. 47 relatives had gathered for what they thought was a family reunion, but Aunt Margaret had transformed it into an auction, a systematic dismantling of everything my grandmother had owned, with proceeds to be fairly distributed among cousins who'd barely visited her in the last decade. I was standing near the buffet table, watching my grandmother's most precious possessions being tagged with lot numbers, when I realized this wasn't grief. It was greed with a gavel. The ring they were auctioning had been on my grandmother's finger 3 weeks ago, when I'd held her hand in hospice. Did my aunts and uncles really think they could sell off her belongings when I'd been the one who'd bought her entire estate at her request? This is a 1947 Tiffany setting, 2-carat diamond, platinum band, Aunt Margaret continued, reading from index cards like she was hosting QVC. Appraised at $12,000, but we're starting low to give everyone a fair chance. Remember, all proceeds will be divided equally among the grandchildren. Rose would have wanted us all to benefit. Rose would have wanted her belongings to go to people who'd loved her, not the highest bidder, but nobody asked me. My cousin Derek raised his hand. 5,000. 6,000, called Uncle Paul's daughter Jennifer, who hadn't visited Grandma in 4 years. 7, Derek countered. I pulled out my phone and opened a specific folder labeled Estate Documents, Rose Bennett. The folder contained something none of them knew about, something that was going to make this auction very short and very awkward. Before we continue, I said, my voice cutting through the bidding war, I have a question about the legal basis for this auction. Aunt Margaret frowned at me. Vanessa, we're in the middle of bidding. Questions later. I think questions now, actually. Specifically, who gave you authorization to auction Grandma's belongings? We're her children, Uncle Thomas said firmly, standing beside Margaret. This is estate property. We have every right to distribute it as we see fit. And we're being fair, Aunt Caroline added. Everything is being auctioned, proceeds split equally among all grandchildren. No favoritism. Rose would have approved. Rose had explicitly told me she wouldn't approve, which was why she'd made different arrangements, but I waited. We've cataloged 47 items, Margaret continued, gesturing to tables laden with jewelry, china, furniture pieces, artwork, and collectibles. The ring is just the first. We have her pearl necklace, the dining room set, the oil paintings, the silver tea service, her book collection. Everything of value. Total estimated worth is about $340,000. Each grandchild should receive roughly $21,000 after auction fees. $21,000. They'd reduce my grandmother's lifetime of collected treasures to a payout, divided among 16 grandchildren, most of whom she'd barely known. I checked my watch. 2:43 p.m. My attorney should be arriving any minute. I'm just curious, I said, walking toward the auction table where Grandma's belongings were displayed like merchandise. Did anyone actually verify ownership before organizing this auction? Ownership? Uncle Thomas looked confused. Rose was our mother. We're her children. Of course we have ownership. Through the estate, you mean? Obviously. And the estate has been through probate? It's in process, Aunt Margaret said dismissively. These things take time, but we're her direct descendants. We have every right to manage her property. Actually, I said calmly, you don't. Because the property isn't part of Rose Bennett's estate. The room went quiet except for someone's child crying in the corner. What are you talking about? Uncle Thomas demanded. I'm talking about the fact that Grandma Rose sold me her estate 6 weeks before she died. Everything in this room, the ring, the jewelry, the furniture, the artwork, all 47 items you've cataloged belongs to me. The silence was absolute. That's impossible, Aunt Margaret said. It's documented. I pulled up a document on my phone. Estate sale agreement, dated October 15th, signed by Rose and Bennett and Vanessa Claire Marshall. Witnessed by her attorney, Gerald Hoffman, and notarized. Purchase price, $425,000 paid in full. You're lying, Derek said. I'm not. Grandma called me in early October. She said she'd been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer, that she had maybe 2 months. She said she'd spent her whole life watching her children, your parents, fight over money, and she refused to let them fight over her things after she was gone. Uncle Paul stood up. Our mother would never cut us out like that. She didn't cut you out. She sold her property to someone she trusted to honor her wishes. Me. The granddaughter who visited every Sunday for 10 years. Who drove her to doctor's appointments, who helped her grocery shop, who sat with her during chemo, who held her hand when she died. We visited, Aunt Caroline protested weakly. Uncle Thomas visited 3 times in the last 5 years. Aunt Margaret came twice. Aunt Caroline, you live 40 minutes away and you saw her at Christmas and Easter. Uncle Paul, you missed her 85th birthday because of a golf tournament. The accusations hung in the air like smoke. But I was there, I continued. Every week. Sometimes twice a week. I knew her favorite television shows, her book club schedule, her bridge group friends. I knew she liked her tea with 1 sugar, and that she'd started writing her memoirs. I knew her. So you manipulated a dying woman into signing over her estate? Aunt Margaret's voice was sharp. I paid fair market value. Grandma had her attorney present. She was fully competent. There's a cognitive assessment from her doctor dated the same day. She wanted to sell. She set the price. She chose the buyer. The banquet hall door opened, and a man in a suit walked in, carrying a leather briefcase. Gerald Hoffman, the attorney who'd handled the estate sale. Gerald, I called. Perfect timing. He approached the auction table, nodding at the family members he recognized. Vanessa asked me to bring the complete documentation. I understand there's some confusion about the estate. Confusion? Uncle Thomas sputtered. She's claiming she bought our mother's entire estate. Because she did, Gerald said calmly, setting his briefcase on the table and opening it. I handled the transaction personally. Rose Bennett, of sound mind and body, sold her estate to her granddaughter Vanessa Marshall on October 15, 2024, for $425,000. He pulled out a thick folder of documents. Here's the signed purchase agreement. Here's the notarized deed transferring property ownership. Here's the cognitive assessment from Dr. Patricia Weber confirming Rose's mental competency. Here's the bank transfer showing Vanessa's payment in full. Here's Rose's handwritten letter explaining her decision. He laid them out like playing cards, each document damning in its clarity. The letter, Aunt Caroline said quietly. What does it say? Gerald picked up the handwritten pages. Would you like me to read it? I nodded. He cleared his throat and began. To my children, Thomas, Margaret, Caroline, and Paul. If you're reading this, I've passed, and you've discovered that I sold my estate to Vanessa. I imagine you're angry. You probably think she manipulated me or took advantage of me in a vulnerable time. You're wrong. I made this decision clearly and deliberately. I've watched you fight over money your entire lives. I've watched you compete, compare, keep score of every perceived slight or unfair advantage. I will not let my death become another battlefield. Vanessa is the only one who visited me consistently. The only one who knew my daily life, my struggles, my joys. She drove me to appointments when none of you could find time. She called me every day just to talk. She treated me like a person, not an inheritance waiting to happen. I sold her my estate for a fair price, money she worked hard to earn. She will honor my wishes for my belongings because she knows what they meant to me. She knows the story of every piece because she listened when I told her. I love you all, but I trust Vanessa with my legacy. Gerald set down the letter. The silence was heavier now, weighted with shame. That's not fair, Aunt Margaret said, tears in her eyes. We had careers, families, obligations. We couldn't visit every week. No one asked you to visit every week, I said. But you could have visited more than twice a year. You could have called more than on her birthday. You could have shown interest in her life instead of just her will. You paid $425,000, Uncle Paul said slowly. Where did you get that kind of money? You're a museum curator. I'm the assistant director of acquisitions at the Seattle Art Museum. I make $180,000 a year. I've been working there for 12 years. I live modestly, I save aggressively, and I had the money when Grandma needed a buyer who would preserve her wishes rather than liquidate everything at auction. Derek was staring at the documents. So everything here, all 47 items, belongs to you? Legally, yes. The estate sale included the house and all contents. I sold the house last month. I didn't need a 3-bedroom home in Bellevue. But I kept everything else. What are you going to do with it all? Jennifer asked. Honor Grandma's wishes. She left specific instructions about what should happen to each piece. I pulled out a small notebook, Grandma Rose's handwriting filling every page. The diamond ring was her mother's engagement ring. She wanted it to go to whichever granddaughter got engaged next. That's my cousin Amy. She got engaged 3 weeks ago. Amy, who'd been sitting quietly in the corner, looked up in shock. The pearl necklace was a gift from Grandpa on their 40th anniversary. She wanted it to go to her oldest great-granddaughter when she turned 18. That's Jennifer's daughter, Emily. The dining room set she wanted to stay in the family, whoever had space for it and would use it for family gatherings. The artwork she wanted distributed to grandchildren who'd expressed interest in specific pieces. The books she wanted donated to the library in her name. I flipped through the notebook. She documented everything. Who should get what and why. Stories about each piece, what it meant to her, what she hoped it would mean to whoever received it. Aunt Margaret sat down heavily. We were going to auction it all off. Split the money. I know. That's why she sold to me. She didn't want her treasures scattered to strangers or reduced to cash. She wanted them kept in the family, given with intention and love. Gerald packed up his documents. The sale is legally binding. Vanessa has full ownership. If anyone wishes to contest, you're welcome to hire your own attorney, but I'll warn you, Rose's competency is thoroughly documented. The sale price was fair market value, and Vanessa has a paper trail of payments and visits stretching back years. You won't win. No one moved to contest. Uncle Thomas approached slowly. Van, I owe you an apology. Several apologies. For not visiting Mom more. For assuming you were somehow less important to her. For not seeing how much you did. I did it because I loved her, not for inheritance. I know that now. He looked at the tables of items, at the auction lot numbers taped to each piece. This whole auction was wrong. We were wrong. Aunt Caroline was crying openly. I should have visited more. I kept meaning to, and then time would pass and I'd feel guilty, and then more time would pass. She knew you loved her, I said gently. She just wished you'd showed it more consistently. What happens now? Aunt Margaret asked. With all of this? Now I distribute everything according to Grandma's wishes. The ring goes to Amy. The pearls will be held for Emily. The dining set, Aunt Caroline, you have the space and you host holidays. Grandma wanted you to have it. Caroline looked stunned. But I barely visited. She loved you anyway. That's what family means. I looked around the room. Every person Grandma wanted to remember will receive something meaningful. Not because of auction bids or cash value, but because she loved you and wanted you to have pieces of her life. Over the next hour, I distributed items according to the notebook. The silver tea service to Uncle Paul's wife, who'd admired it years ago. The oil painting of the coast to Derek, who'd mentioned loving coastal art. The antique clock to Jennifer, who collected vintage timepieces. Every gift came with a story, Grandma's story about the piece, why she valued it, why she wanted that specific person to have it. People cried. People apologized. People promised to do better, be more present, value family over money. Amy approached as things were winding down, the engagement ring now on her finger. Thank you. For buying the estate. For preserving Grandma's wishes. She made it easy by being clear about what she wanted. The rest of them were going to sell everything? That was the plan. 47 items at auction, split the proceeds. That's so sad. These things meant something to her. I know. That's why she sold them to me. I looked at the ring on her finger, catching the light. That ring has been in the family for 77 years. Grandma's mother wore it, then Grandma, now you. That's how heirlooms should work. 3 weeks later, I received a letter from Aunt Margaret. Vanessa, I've been thinking about Mom's letter, about what she said about us fighting over money. She was right. We made everything about money, about fairness, about who got what. We forgot to make it about love. Thank you for being there when we weren't. Thank you for honoring her wishes when we would have auctioned them off. Thank you for reminding us what family should be. The dining room set looks beautiful in Caroline's house. We had Sunday dinner there last week, the first Sunday dinner we've had in years. We toasted Mom with her china, told stories, laughed. We're trying to do better. You saved more than heirlooms. You saved the family. Love, Margaret. I kept the letter in Grandma's notebook, along with her careful instructions and stories. The estate sale had cost me $425,000, but it preserved something worth far more. The careful intention behind a lifetime of collected treasures, the stories of where each piece came from and what it meant, the connections between objects and people and love. They'd auctioned my grandmother's ring, not knowing I'd bought the estate. They'd tried to liquidate her legacy, not knowing she'd protected it. And in trying to split proceeds equally, they'd almost destroyed what actually mattered. The meaning behind the things, the stories that made them valuable beyond price. I kept 3 pieces for myself. The notebook with Grandma's handwriting. A photo of us from her 85th birthday, her hands holding mine. And a simple ceramic mug she'd used every morning for tea. Worth nothing at auction. Priceless to me. That's the difference between price and value. They learned it at a family reunion that became an estate sale that revealed who really knew my grandmother. Not the people who wanted to profit from her possessions, but the granddaughter who'd shown up every Sunday to share her life.